Welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 313 for Monday, September 2nd, 2024. This is a podcast all about Minecraft, available across all major podcast platforms, including in video form on YouTube. If you're enjoying the show, consider subscribing wherever you're listening to this. My name is Johnny, but the internet knows me as Pixel Riffs, and joining me, as always, coming into focus, it's Joel Duggan. Hi, Joel.
Soon to be in higher resolution. We were talking about the new camera setup that I'm looking at adding to the studio on the render distance, which is the extended version of the program that we record every single week for our patrons. You get an extra 15 to 30 minutes of podcast, and it sometimes is Minecraft focused, sometimes it's studio focused, sometimes it's focused about Rings of Power. More on that later. So we will, of course, point everyone towards patreon.com/thespawnchunks. If you'd like to support the show, it does help the show continue to go week to week. We have gone for, I want to say, 5 or 6 years now without missing a single week, thanks to our patrons. And it is the top of the month. It is an excellent time to say thank you ever so much to our patrons that support us. You also get bonus material like the monthly Minecraft Hangout. That happened this weekend on August 31st. We typically do those on the last Saturday of the month. That's where we sit down with our patrons and talk about what they've been building in Minecraft, complete with screenshots in the Discord. There's a recording that's available later. And by the time you're listening to this, it will also be available on the Patreon page. I've just got it ready to publish after this. And we also do quarterly hangouts, and that's where Johnny and I sit down and talk about the progress of the show, the downloads, how we're doing on YouTube, all those kind of fun behind the scene metrics. If you like that kind of stuff, consider becoming a patron. It really does a lot to help the show, and you get access to a lot of cool things.
I like to think of our monthly Minecraft Hangouts as a long-form, patron-focused version of the quick login that we do on the show every week. So it's always nice to check in and see what's new in everybody else's Minecraft life. But for now, it's our time again. So Joel, what's new on the Citadel?
I have been in the bowels of the iron farm. Last week we finished the outside, the aesthetics, and moved on to work on the insides. And yes, this week I have spent a considerable amount of time messing around with the crafter, the new block in 1.21 to me. And I have finished the decoration and the assignment of different storage in the collection room. We've got 4 shulker boxes that are ready to receive iron blocks. My iron ingots are now being crafted into iron blocks. That was a fairly straightforward setup. I'd seen it done a couple of times in different videos and just used a composter to make the correct redstone signal compared to the one coming out of the crafter. The only thing I had to do that was a bit of an error was compensate for the crafter kind of spitting things out randomly. So I had to put a couple of trapdoors over the waterway in order to keep the iron blocks from shooting all over the place and being on the edge of the waterway or piling up somewhere. Because once you get one item sitting there, then it'll pile up and grab other items as they go by. But everything is working pretty well. I did solve the flow issue. I was having an issue where iron ingots temporarily, as they were coming in, were going past the hopper. Like the first hopper would grab 1 or 2 ingots, but if 4 ingots came in from an iron golem, they would go into the second hopper. And so my first shulker box was filling up, but my second shulker box was getting like trickles. And I was like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, I don't understand why the first hopper is not taking all 5 of those ingots. It really does not compute. And I could not get it to do anything. I tried a bunch of things. I tried honey blocks to slow them down. I tried everything. Well, I wasn't thinking fourth dimensionally. Once I started making blocks, I'm only putting out 1 item at a time, because an iron golem only drops like 3 to 5 ingots, maybe, and it takes 9 to craft a block. So now my crafter is just putting out 1 block at a time. So now my shulker boxes are filling up very steady, 1 block at a time. And there's also some extra storage behind there. We've got 3 hoppers, I think, going into each shulker box. And that's just because of the design. I wanted to have some depth and some cool, like, magma blocks and things hidden behind stuff. So we do have an extra 15 slots behind every shulker box. And then everything after that is just going to get spit into a cactus. Because if we have more than 4 shulker boxes full of iron blocks for the server, we're good. We don't need any more. We can just destroy the rest. Yeah. The rest of the time was spent troubleshooting and trying to figure out how to sort out the poppies, which I know I was talking about last week. And instead of going at it with a filter, which of course I don't need, I'm already filtering out the iron ingots. The only thing left is poppies. I can just use a hopper. And so big shout out to Sweet Sandy, one of the moderators in my chat that was giving me a lot of redstone back and forth live as we were going. Very helpful, as I am a little bit rusty with redstone, and I don't often do live redstone. I've never done this before live on stream. So some of the streams were a little bit slower, little thoughtful pauses as I kind of pondered over what was going on. But what we decided on doing was using a hopper minecart under the hopper that was pulling out the poppies and setting that hopper minecart into a loader system. So instead of like a farm, waiting for the hopper minecart to be completely full and then sending it on its way, we were waiting for it to be a specific volume. So we went with the Redstone Power 2, which was 23 items. Anything over 22 tricks the system, the piston lets go, and that minecart then travels over a bunch of hoppers back and forth, just like a minecart powered furnace system. So
right,
drops coal on the way out, drops coal on the way back. Same thing with this, drops poppies on the way out, poppies on the way back. Essentially, we discovered we're getting about 3 poppies in every hopper. And so I just started making the systems I needed. The first hopper just went to a dropper that spat out poppies, which is one thing we wanted to store. The next hopper went to a crafter, and that crafter was turning the poppies into red dye. And the next one was going into not 1 hopper, but 3 hoppers, because we discovered that it's roughly 9 poppies to get 1 bone meal. So then rather than trying to figure out how many items could be pulled from a cart or how do I siphon that, I just increased the number of hoppers. So the next 3 hoppers kind of point into themselves. They go into a composter. The composter makes bone meal. The bone meal goes into a crafter. The crafter spits out white dye into the water stream. That was all pretty straightforward. The only thing that I ran into that was a problem, and this is something I find very odd about crafters, is that the crafting speed and hopper speed are different.
Yeah.
And so if you want to use the crafter as the power source to then trigger the crafter, i.e. when it is X full, it then spits out an item. Poppies are coming in faster than the crafter can spit out a block or an item. And so what ends up happening is that the charge from a crafter is more than you're expecting, and it no longer triggers itself. Mm-hmm. So I'd get 2 or 3 poppies into the crafter. The first one would get turned into dye, and then the other 2 would sit there. And eventually, it's just not going to work because it's going to eventually have 64 poppies in that one slot, and it's not going to be able to craft dye. So what I had to do was add a observer clock. So as soon as the thing is triggered, there's a loop that shoots a pulse back to the crafter, and it spits out all of the dye. It turns whatever poppies it has, 2, 3, whatever it is, it just turns them into dye. I'm not so much worried about proportions. I'm just thinking like, I just want to get the stuff. And just like with the iron blocks, any extra stuff we have will just get tossed into a cactus and we're fine. Because again, if we have a shulker box of pink dye or red dye for the server, we're good. So with that, I was really stuck. And this was the end of the stream. I was kind of brain fried on how to make the pink dye. Because I was like, okay, do I want to take some of the white and some of the red and try to siphon that off into pink dye? And that would just take this redstone room down another like 12 blocks, and it just got really, really complicated. And then I thought overnight, well, that's silly. What I should do is simply repeat the red dye, white dye modules, and instead of having those modules spit into the water stream, I'll have them spit into a final crafter and it'll make pink dye. So that's what we did. So now, instead of the hopper minecart going back and forth over 5 or 6 hoppers and coming back with like 9 or 10 hot poppies in it, the minecart goes across another 2 hoppers for bone meal and another, so there's an additional 3. So now it goes over close to 7 or 8 hoppers and it comes back empty. So which is great. So there's bone meal that gets made at the end. There's red dye that gets made at the end. And they both get fed into a crafter that makes pink dye. So I have everything going into a water stream. And then up top by the storage, I have the traditional filters that will just grab each item and put it into the shulker boxes accordingly. I still have to go get the extra shulker boxes. I don't have those yet. But the trickiest thing about all of this was trying to figure out how to get the crafter to craft pink dye without the poppies, which come in faster than the bone meal. And so Sweet Sandy suggested in my chat that instead of using the crafter itself to power the crafting mechanism, base everything off of the white dye crafter. So when the white die crafter crafts, that is when the red die crafter crafts, and then shortly after that with a delay, that's when the pink die crafter crafts. And the reason for that is because no matter what, bone meal and white dye is only ever coming in one at a time, because it takes 9 poppies to fill a composter, and after that the flow rate is just not fast enough for the composter to be putting out a high volume. It's one every couple minutes. And so right now there is some redstone adjustment that I have to make, because even with like one space between the crafter that does the red dye and the crafter that does the pink dye, I will still end up sometimes with 2 red dye and 1 pink dye in the crafter. And then what happens is it crafts the pink dye, there's an empty space, and then we've got 2 red dye in the crafter, and it stops making pink dye. It's so specific. Like, I was really surprised how something as simple as making pink dye, when you don't want to manually stack the items in the crafter, became when you wanted to have it do something automatically. Like, the timing is very specific, and it's strange that the timing is slower than hoppers, because hoppers are how you have to feed items into crafters automatically if that's what you want to do. So I did find that very odd, but we solved it through, again, help with community back and forth in the chat room, and it's worked out, and I'm happy to have done the challenge. I've learned a lot about crafters, and just like anything else, redstone, putting crafters next to each other sometimes is essential, but most times you're going to want to avoid it. Like, you're going to want to give yourself a lot of space if you're using the crafter itself to trigger itself, because it's the amount of redstone that you need is just wild.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to the amount of redstone you had to put around a skulk sensor before calibrated skulk sensors were a thing. And you've got to have like a comparator detecting what the sensor is hearing and then comparing that to a signal that's every frequency level you don't want it to hear, and then have that wrap back around to lock a repeater so that the signal doesn't go out if it goes above a certain point but not below a certain point. And so you ended up with a 3x4 footprint every time you wanted to use a skulk sensor to detect a specific frequency, whereas now you just have that in the form of like a calibrated skulk sensor and usually a comparator or some redstone wire feeding in to make sure it only detects a certain signal strength. And yeah, there's a lot to crafters. They are effectively like something that you have to put some effort into redstone systems work in order to really use effectively, unless it's something as simple as the first application of this you talked about, which is converting a single piece of like a single crafting ingredient into a full block of that crafting ingredient, like the iron blocks, right? Like, you haven't taken the step of, well, this iron farm is now also going to craft us anvils and iron bars and, you know, pressure plates and trapdoors and all of the other stuff that you can make with iron, much less everything else in iron is an ingredient for like pistons and so forth. Like, you're not taking it to that extreme, because that means bolting on an additional like 5 or 6 unrelated farms to get you to everything iron can make. But I think it's really challenging, the timing thing, especially like when I initially thought up, oh, okay, I can try and figure out a factory of sorts that can just point to a certain redstone component on like a with an arrow and an item frame, so that you can dial up basically a comparator signal, and that will point to what recipe it wants to craft. Then I realized you have to feed in crafting ingredients in very specific quantities with very specific timing, and you can't just pile them all into a hopper, because if any of those ingredients are the same as each other, they'll stack, and then the hopper will extract those ingredients first, so you'll end up with 3 redstone torches next to each other in the crafting recipe instead of in the triangle shape you want them to make in order to craft a comparator. And so there's so many little nuances to using the crafter that, yeah, it takes a lot of trial and error if you're doing it for the first time in survival, and a lot of like fiddly systems work in creative, I imagine, to get it optimized and like to the point where it's a compact redstone system. Like it's a much more, I guess, easy to learn, difficult to master thing. And that's where we initially, like when I was talking about the crafter on this show, I was saying there's a high skill ceiling for this block. It's the kind of thing where a lot of the problems you've encountered would be solved immediately by them implementing some kind of template system where you could tell it only output from the crafter if it's able to make pink dye. But then that's sort of removing all of the gameplay of, okay, this is now a puzzle. like how do we solve that? Like what redstone kind of trickery can we use to solve this? How do you feel about that now? Like, are you happy that you've been able to work through this as like a systems engineering problem, or would you be happier having saved the time and just having a one and done template for it?
I think the only frustrating thing for me is not actually to do with the crafter. It's the inability to control the volume of certain blocks. So if you've got a trickle where you're only ever getting, one thing at a time, like bone meal into the white dye crafter, then like making that crafter shoot out its item is very simple. 2 observers, a comparator, and a piece of redstone dust. You're good. It's very compact. It's 2 or 3 blocks wide, and a single line, like tileable. Like if you had that happening a number of times in a row, super easy. I think the problem for me is, like I said, the volume of stuff. You have to somehow siphon and control when you've got more than one item coming in at a time. And I understand why items work like that for every other use in a hopper minecart, any other storage system that we're using, or item transport.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the crafter, I feel like the thing that I find, I guess, frustrating is like the combination between pressing the buttons on the crafter, like locking the slots and giving you a different output. So like 1 through 9 in terms of signal strength. However, the moment that something stacks up into that single spot left, like if you've got 8 spots locked, the 9th spot starts to get more, then it goes beyond what you can compare to it. And so that I don't find intuitive. Like it should be a max 9, and anything above 9, your normal setup should trigger. But the problem there is you have to have a loop if you're going to have more than one thing in there. So just like you were saying, like I guess the only example I can think of from iron, not that you'd want iron nuggets, but if it's something that you can craft from a single iron block.
Yeah.
And if I was trying to craft something like that out of a single iron block, then I would have the same problem. I would have more than one iron ingot coming in at a time, and I would have to then have some sort of loop on it. So it does make things a little bit more complicated. I don't think it's necessarily bad. I think that the hard part is understanding why it didn't do what you wanted it to, because there's not a lot of feedback other than like, well, it didn't work. Like it's not like I'm getting 2 red dye in the pink dye crafter, but why am I getting 2 dye in the pink dye crafter?
Yeah.
And to understand the delay and the order of things, like there's a lot of trial and error there, and I do wish that it was just a little bit more like I think because they want it accessible to early game players and new players to manually craft a bunch of stuff. Like you want to be able to stack this whole thing up manually and then just hit a button or have it repeat making dispensers, like whatever, those the pain in the butt crafting recipes. And because of that, everything stacks. But I think if there was a way to have items not stack in the crafter so that the next poppy would have to go in the next spot as opposed to the other spot, or have it behave, I think, in a way that you expect. Because when I've got I've got a red dye in the crafter, I would expect the next piece of red dye to go into the spot where there's already red dye, and it doesn't. It goes next to it, and that's weird. And so there's a couple of non-intuitive things that happen that, again, I don't think it's bad that it's complicated. I think it's just a little frustrating, probably more so for new players, when you can't get the visual feedback or the knowledge feedback that you need to troubleshoot. And I mean, I had help from the chat room. Like I had help being like, oh, you need to delay, base everything off of the bone meal timer because it's the slowest, but then also you have to delay the pink dye crafter so that it doesn't make red dye. Like it's stuff like that was, and I don't have a lot of complex redstone timing experience. Like people that make piston doors and more complicated machines have to worry about like putting a certain action happening a couple ticks after a previous action. And I just don't have a lot of experience there. So it wasn't the first thing that came to mind. So a lot of it is player error for sure. But I would think that it could use a little bit more maybe like in the crafter UI to have something indicate that it's either going to stack or not going to stack. I found that inconsistency a little bit weird.
Yeah, it's weird behavior because it's stacking whenever there isn't an empty space somewhere else in the crafter UI, which I think is an issue when it comes to crafting stuff like dispensers, because you want to be able to refill it with all of the cobblestone and redstone every time it uses those along with a bow. But then after a certain point, it's going to realize that the first resource you put in has an empty space available in the middle, and then it's going to block the spot that the bow wants to go on. So ideally, you want to have slightly less than a stack, and when the bow goes in, it adds all of the stone and redstone around it, and then the crafter outputs. And so that's like a slightly more complex redstone system that you've got to build around it, when you've also got hoppers coming in from left and right, transferring all of these resources to it, and you've got to figure out where the bows are coming from in the first place. So yeah, it's interesting. Again, difficult to learn, difficult to master, but potentially some early game things that are going to keep like modestly technical players at least a little bit happy. So for my part, I've not been doing anything anywhere near this technical. I've been playing a lot in the Fantasy Minecraft SMP, where the group has completed the dragon fight on stream. It was on a Friday, so that's normally my day off. I wasn't able to be a part of it, but I did some boss fighting on my own throughout the week. There's a little a boss progression that happens in this mod pack where you go and fight almost like Dark Souls style bosses. Like, you go out and seek out specific structures. There's a big boss with a big health bar. It looks like a skeletal knight wielding a sword, and then it turns into a ghost after you beat it for the first phase, and then that kind of second phase transition that bosses have sometimes in other games. And yeah, I've discovered that my necromancy skills, which I'd been leveling up in the background but not using very much for like the day-to-day gameplay, come in really handy when it comes to fighting these bosses. And so I had a little bit of fun with that, realizing that, this floating eyeball that I can spawn that shoots lasers at stuff is actually very good at fighting boss monsters, which is fine because it doesn't help me with any of the other aspects of the game. This eyeball isn't building anything for me. So I can focus on building, I guess, while this thing sort of zips around and lasers any zombies that come near me. But yeah, I've done a bit more on that, done a bit more questing, trying to find a few of the other structures that the quest book rewards you for going out and finding. So I haven't spent as much time in Survival Guide this week. I am doing a bit of research for the city building projects that I plan to. Again, sort of collating source material and finding some fun things that I want to take inspiration from, including, actually, a really neat little game that I've had my eye on for a while called Tiny Glade. I mean, it describes itself as a game, but it also sort of says it's not exactly a game. It's a kind of castle doodling tool in a similar way to Townscaper, which I think I've mentioned on this show before, as like it basically has this invisible grid that you can just plop down little houses and stuff on. Tiny Glade is like that, but with a small kind of forest clearing area. It's only available as a demo right now, but it comes out later this month. I think September 23rd is the release date. And so you end up with a small area that you can build walls and paths and a couple of basic castle buildings in the demo right now. And you can just experiment with little combinations of those, and they have really nice ways of snapping together and connecting to each other to form a more natural-looking structure. Whenever you draw a path up to one of them, it creates a doorway in the wall in front of it, or if it's a wall just kind of isolated by itself, it creates an archway. And so you can combine these different elements to create these little cute dioramas of like what looks like a little model castle or a little house on a hill or something like that. So I was experimenting with that a little bit and decided that once the game comes out and you have a larger build area to work with, plus a few more additional elements, it's going to be a really nice way to plan out and structure a Minecraft castle, take a few screenshots of it. There's a photo mode that actually allows you to walk around in first person, so you can kind of explore it on foot as well. And it would be a really neat way of prototyping Minecraft castles. So that's probably what I'll end up using it for once I get around to getting the full version later this month. But yeah, I'm planning a castle as part of this steampunky kind of build. It's probably going to have a few technological looking elements that aren't quite the same aesthetic as Tiny Glade, but I like the idea of having a few other resources to work with other than just 2D concept art. Like being able to explore models of stuff, I think is really useful for Minecraft, when so often, even if you're building with a specific perspective in mind, you want something to be 3D. You want it to be something that the player can walk around, and it's difficult often to imagine what the inside of a space looks like if you're only seeing it from one angle in 2D as a piece of concept art. So I thought this would be a really fun way of exploring that and bringing a 3D element into the sketching process for this build I'm planning.
That's really cool. It looks like a really neat little game experience, cozy computer experience.
Definitely.
There's definitely a genre of games out there like this that don't really qualify as a game per se, but they're like a digital experience or a digital building experience. And I like the use, it's not extreme, but I like the use of tilt shift photography and or camera work to make it feel almost like a miniature as you're like, It feels very fantasy like, and it's not realistic graphics. They're kind of cartoony. And so the tilt shift really kind of adds to that kind of ethereal fairyland kind of vibe. And I remember Townscaper. There's one other one that I've seen recently. I don't remember the name of it, but similar vibe. But this looks really, really fun. And for anybody that doesn't have that kind of like 3D space skill, like I know a lot of people that I talk to that just don't understand how I can look at an object and imagine it in 3D space and then like draw it or render it or something like that. And people can see flat, but then there's like, but I don't know how you in your head spin that around and draw a different version of it, even though you can't see it. That's just sometimes it's training, sometimes it's people just have that skill and some people don't. But having tools like this, like you said, modeling for reference in Minecraft, a couple things. One, it means that you're not looking at another person's Minecraft build, so instead of feeling like you might be copying something or whatever, you can say, no, I'm just gonna use this tool that gives me something I can spin around and see what it looks like from 5 different directions, and then I can use Minecraft to interpret that, and I've created both. And it gives you like the tools to do that. And I think the only frustrating thing here would be having it look really cute and cozy with some details in TinyClade, and then not having the small sub-block details available in Minecraft, for like path details, the doors, like the flower pots and stuff like that. You can get so far in Minecraft, but I think that there might be, for me, I'm just like, well, I could do this in Minecraft, or I could just do more of this in TinyClade, and maybe I'll just spend the afternoon in TinyClade instead of in Minecraft.
Yeah. No, it's very cute when it like you put a ground floor window in, it'll put like a little rag hanging off of it, and then there'll be like a flower pot and a wheelbarrow just automatically appear, and so it adds detail to the scene for you as you go without that having to be placed manually. And so there's some really neat aspects of that. But yeah, I think the main thing I'm taking away from this is how to put together a castle roof in a way that feels like it works for the building, because they do a really good job of like snapping roof sections together and figuring out how the roof of a larger outbuilding kind of connects, and how like the sections that raise up from the center of the castle are going to have the roof slope match up with the wall alongside it. So like those are going to be things that are really valuable to Minecraft builders who just struggle with roofs, like I think I have for a really long time. The only other thing I've been doing this week is getting a little Snapshot survival time in to get used to the new bundles. So I figure that's a great chance to talk about the news this week. Snapshot 24W35A came out for Minecraft Java Edition. That was published on Wednesday, August 28th. To quote the article, in this week's Snapshot, we have addressed some important bugs related to village raid spawns, bundles, and redstone. So in experimental features in 24W35A, selecting items in a bundle is now only done by scrolling. The developer's note adds, in previous snapshots you could select items from a bundle with the number keys. We removed this because it was conflicting with hotkeys used by expert players, and it was not as useful now the bundle can have more than 10 items visible. Changes in 24W35A, so not just experimental features, but these apply to the game and will be applying to the game going forward. Raiders must find a place to spawn no more than 96 blocks vertically above or below a village center, or a raid will not start. It is now much less likely for villagers not to find a valid place to spawn when raiding. Technical changes in Datapack version 51. There are some changes to trial spawners, making them easier to customize through datapacks. The empty loot table has been removed. Sheep loot tables have had a few adjustments, and mushroom shearing is now also controlled by a loot table. More detailed information about these changes can be found in the Minecraft.net changelog for Snapshot 24W35A. We'll have that linked in our show notes. There are some fixed bugs as well. I'll give you a highlight of a few of them. Redstone lamps not showing on maps. Drowned not chasing you if they're in 1 block deep water. Trader llamas would not attack zombies, drowned, husks, zombie villagers, or illagers. The map color for wheat was incorrect. Beehive items at full honey level do not appear with honey in the inventory as an item or in the hand. Bees do not leave their hives in the nether and end in some cases, and bee nests and hive items had no lore. All of that has been fixed along with a raft of other bug fixes, so for a full changelog, once again, head over to minecraft.net or find the changelog linked in our show notes at thespawnchunks.com.
I'm a little confused as to what the lore is for bee nests and hive items.
So I think the lore is the additional text line that you get that explains like whether an item has contents. Like when a bundle has it's something that sometimes it's in advanced tooltips, and I think somebody highlighted it in the Discord this week that advanced tooltips now shows you the honey level and how many bees are in a hive that you've collected with Silk Touch, which is not something it did before, and I'm pretty sure that was added along with the bug fixes in this snapshot, which is great because when you've got multiple beehives and nests, if they've got bees, if they've got a honey level already, they don't stack next to each other, but it's often very difficult to know, does this one have full capacity? Is there still one bee that's missing from one of these? And if you're trying to fill up a honey farm or a honeycomb farm to be as productive as possible, you want to make sure that you have full hives across the board. So I think it's kind of a nice quality of life change for anybody who's interested in like farming bees long term, is make sure you've got that information on display, right?
Oh, for sure. As someone that's creating an apiary in West Hill, 100% going to be useful as to where, the bees are going to be. I misunderstood lore. I was thinking like, is this going to be like looking up a recipe online and it's going to like, well, my great grandfather had beehives.
Yeah, it's got like a little like anecdote or some flavor text or something.
Yeah.
Like, there's not a lot of that in Minecraft in general. I wonder how much it would change the game if it had like Dark Souls style item descriptions that told you the story of Minecraft if only you took the time to read them. Yeah.
It's the kind of thing that I think players would enjoy, but then eventually overlook as they beeline for endgame and
for sure.
efficiency and all that kind of stuff. But the other thing that jumped out to me in the bug fixes that I really like are the changes to redstone lamps and, more interestingly, wheat on Minecraft maps. The fact that wheat was green on Minecraft maps, and an ugly green at that, is one of the reasons why we added the Zero's world map and Zero's mini map on the Citadel, because it just looked awful, and I wanted a map that looked better. And I'm really excited about this because I've got several areas on the Citadel that have wheat fields, and it's going to look nice now. It's going to look like a proper wheat field. And I'm looking forward to maybe even attempting to create some decoration in the keep in West Hill with real Minecraft maps that you can hang on the wall. If I can get them to look right in the light. They tend to have a weird grid look if they're not lit properly, but we'll see what I can do. But that's cool. I think that's a great change. It's a subtle change, but I think it's going to make a lot more sense for, if you're using a Minecraft map, and it's like, well, I've got a giant yellow wheat field there. Why is it green? It's going to be nice to have that reflect that look that people might want from those maps.
Yeah. Glow item frames, I think, are the thing that solves the item, the maps in item frames being differently lit. I'm pretty sure that's how it works. Otherwise, I think you just have to control light level and place all your maps against like glowstone or something, which is frustrating as an experience, I know.
Yeah, I did that in the Modern City, our information center. Yeah, it's like the tourist station basically has a map on the wall, but it makes sense in that Modern City to have it all placed on. I think we've used sea lanterns, and the fact that it's a giant neon wall of a map makes sense. It's like a subway map that you might see lit up underground, right? So it'll be nice to have some more subtle lighting happening with the glow item frames in West Hill. I'll have to experiment with that because I do have some glow ink set aside for signs and different things like that for sure.
Yeah. So the thing I wanted to talk about in the quick login, but thought we might as well save it for the news, is I spent some time in a 24W35A snapshot this week trying out bundles in survival. And after having had a couple of misgivings about them previously, I'm much happier with where they are now. First of all, the new crafting recipe we know is a lot more friendly for various reasons. Obviously friendlier to rabbits, but also friendlier to players who might not log in anywhere they could find rabbit hides, so you get hold of leather very easily. I think I killed a few cows before I got some leather, but I got 2 leather from that cow, and the first spider that dropped string also dropped 2 string, so I immediately had access to 2 bundles as soon as I got those materials, and that's great. Like, you can get string from abandoned mine shafts, cats can drop it if you tame a cat in a village, there's so many like easy options for string. So it's really easy to get hold of bundles to begin with. And then the GUI obviously has shrunk since its initial implementation where you could see all 64 items. And now we can see 12 items before it starts hiding rows. I think that's better. The minimum amount of items you see is still 8, because once it hides the bottom row, moves 1 item into the start of the next row, and then it still has the little like plus 13 or whatever, how many items it's hidden in the row below. So that aspect I'm still getting my head around, but I think being able to see more items makes them more usable feeling. And I found that when I was bundling more than 12 unique items, I didn't necessarily need to know what was further down the bundle, because at that point I wasn't using it for utility, right? I was using it for long-term storage of just the little bits and pieces, the odds and ends, like the occasional bit of granite or diorite or something that you dig through, and you're not necessarily going mining to collect those materials, but you still don't necessarily want to throw them away. They just take up a single stack of your inventory space when you only got 1 or 2 blocks of them because you had to mine through them to get to something else. So yeah, I think bundles are starting to get to where I like them to be. And I think, honestly, having used it a little bit now, the ability to select items from them is a game changer when you're using them for utility stuff. Like, my usual approach, which we discussed on the show before, is to bundle a crafting table, an ender chest, a furnace, and a stone cutter. And that way you've got all 4 of those workstations only taking up 1 inventory space, and they're the ones you use quite regularly. You're smelting food as you go, you're smelting resources, you're crafting stuff on the regular, you need access to an ender chest for long-term storage, and the stone cutter is really great as a builder. I do a lot of building, and I like to only craft stairs or slabs or whatever as I need them, so that I can just carry bulk resources in my inventory the rest of the time. And being able to select one of those instead of having to unpack all 4 to get to my stone cutter if it's at the bottom of the bag is great. Like, honestly, it's a really, really good change. And it almost feels like it's halfway to being one of those mods that I think Azuma was trying out for a while, where you have like an item selector on a single slot of your hotbar that you could scroll up and down to get to like different types of stairs if you're building with them, right? And everything kind of gets compacted into one space. Obviously, you can't open the bundle from the hotbar in the same way. You're still interacting with it as a hover over inventory item, but I think it's a really smart way of giving players access to stuff like that, and effectively a single slot of your inventory becomes that selectable workstation block, like bundle. Like it becomes like a drawer that you can pull stuff out of and only pick out one thing instead of having to unpack into 4 empty spaces in your inventory, which relies on you having 4 empty spaces in your inventory, which is not usually the case when you're building. So there's a few little use cases starting to pop up that I think are going to be really useful, and selecting stuff out of a bundle has been a better experience than I expected to be honest. Like, once you're actually in survival using them instead of just plodding around with them in creative and seeing what's possible, I think they become a lot more useful once you've developed a bit more of the muscle memory of using them.
I mean, it all sounds like good changes, right? It's great that they've listened to player feedback. And I think the big thing that I noticed was the note that you mentioned last week, which was the removal of using hotkeys and using the scroll wheel instead to access different items, because of your muscle memory of using a hotkey to move things to different spots in your inventory. Where I tend to do more manual stuff. Like, I'm more of a mouse wheel guy. Even when I'm scrolling from like pickaxe to bow or shovel, whatever, I'm using the mouse wheel to go up and down. I'm not using the hotkey. I've never been good like that. I've always, even in first person shooters, I've always used a mouse wheel or other game mechanic that's available as opposed to pressing 1, 2, or 3. I really want my fingers on QSAD for movement, and I don't tend to reach up beyond that. So I think that's a good move as well. And it's interesting that the feedback that you got for different uses for the bundle and using them for the crafting blocks and those kind of important things that are just going to take up a good deal of space in your inventory, but you're going to need them anyway. I think it's a great use for it. We have an email about bundles and UI as well that I think is also interesting to this discussion. So I don't want to cannibalize any of my thoughts there, but I still haven't really tried the bundles. I'm sure I'll add them to the Citadel when they are available. And I'm curious to see how they might get used, because like everybody on the Citadel is end game. So I don't know, outside of exploring new areas or being in a situation where you're getting a lot of stuff like trial chambers, like if you're getting a lot of stuff that you need to like reduce your inventory clutter, I can see them being useful there. But I right now I don't see how I'm going to use anything on the daily unless I'm going on a specific mission, adventure, or something on the Citadel as an endgame player. I'm probably just going to have more shulker boxes around than not. But I think that given the number of times we talk to players in our community or in the community in general that we hear from about starting new worlds, starting over, people that play Minecraft Bingo, like I can see the bundle being a real different advantage in something like Minecraft Bingo, right?
Yeah, definitely. Like you could definitely clear up your inventory a lot more easily that way. There's a lot of utility for it. I even got a tweet from Civic Kitty, who was a supporter of the Spawn Chunks once upon a time. Not sure if they're still listening or still supporting, but they mentioned using the bundle for lodestone compasses because they'll stack on Java. I don't think they do on Bedrock right now, but they stack up to 64 because you can take a stack of compasses and all attune them to the same lodestone. But imagine attuning them to 12 different lodestones and having a series of compasses, all different names, so the names would pop up if you highlight them whilst you're scrolling through the contents of your bundle, and that will tell you which direction something is on your world. Or like if you're making a maze, for example, you give somebody a bundle with 12 compasses and go, okay, like the key that you need to access the second part of the maze is attuned to this lodestone compass. You've just got to find your way to that. And so you're using the bundle almost as like a little mini map, but without a top-down view. You're using it to get you like vague directions to where you're going. Like there are little uses like that I think once players figure out, oh, okay, I can just stash a few things away, but still access them in a way that feels useful. Like the fact that the compass will still point you in the correct direction if you're looking at it in a bundle is really cool. You could do the same with clocks if you're the type of person who wants to know when you come up from the mines, is it going to be dark on the surface or is it light? The clock doesn't have to take up inventory space if it's just in the bottom of your bundle waiting to tell you what the time is. I think there's little quality of life things that people can still use as like fun use cases for the bundle that you wouldn't have thought of otherwise.
We were just talking about maps. I mean, you could use it to store either maps that you've filled in and no longer need in your inventory. You could use them to, especially if you put them in the right order and you have those maps labeled. Like if you know you need like a 9x9 grid of maps, you could label each map 1 through 9 and then see which map is which. And if you realize that, oh, wait a minute, I'm missing a piece from map 9, I can dig that out of my bundle and then go and fill that in flying around, or update it because maybe you've made a change in the area because you've built a farm or something, right? That could be really useful too.
What I ended up using them for was when I was mining for precious resources. I did about an hour's worth of mining in a huge iron vein, so I was getting tons of iron, tons of tuff, filling up my inventory with blocks. I was crafting the resources into full blocks like raw iron, bit of raw copper, lapis blocks when I got them, redstone blocks when I got them. And I was bundling all of the leftovers from the crafting process. So anything that you don't have 9 of, that goes in the bundle. And at that point, it's taking up less inventory space. So if all you're collecting then is iron, you have room for another 5 stacks of iron because you put like the 3 redstone dust, the 2 lapis, the occasional diamond that you get. You've put that in the bundle to leave room for the stuff you're getting in bulk. And I think that alone really justifies its existence in your inventory because it's one slot that is removing all of the junk that you could be taking up like 6 or 7 slots with. For precious resource gathering and stuff, I think it's a really useful thing. 2 things before we move on that I think would make bundles really useful. One, the kind of pie in the sky version is if they were accessible from the hotbar, and so they could function a bit more like the inventory swapping thing that I mentioned people have implemented in modded Minecraft. That's a little bit far-fetched, I think, for vanilla implementation, but could be a really interesting way of solving some people's inventory woes in a very specific way. The other thing which I think is more likely is that since they're now primarily a leather item, the ability to dye them still comes back into the conversation, and I think keeping track of which bundle is which at a glance, especially since they recently said, you might want to consider making multiple bundles if hiding items is a problem for you, making some way of keeping track of them I think is going to be a really smart thing going forward. So whether that shows up in the next update or whether that's an implementation they want to save for the future, I think players are only going to thank them for it if the team does that in the long run.
And I think that dyeing the bundle, if they do go that road, it should be fairly bright or true to what you are going to dye it, rather than dyeing a brown bundle green and have it be kind of like a muddy brown green. Like I would want it to be green. I rather than the way that the leather armor is, like, it doesn't quite give you the color that you are expecting sometimes. And I think that if it was a little bit more primary, it would be helpful for that. I don't know what that means for players that are color vision challenged, but I feel like there should be settings maybe in Minecraft already that will help with that. But at that point, you might just have to label them. You can name a bundle, certainly.
Yeah, you can rename them in an anvil. So that's the kind of halfway measure that I'm taking right now. Is like one of them's going to be labeled food, one of them's going to be labeled like workstations or whatever, that kind of thing. But then if you have like color vision problems, if you're colorblind, you can always download resource packs that would help with that, I imagine. Like I think if there isn't a resource pack built into Minecraft by now, there are certainly some the community have made which are invaluable to players who deal with that. So yeah, I think we should move on, especially since the email is about bundles and inventory in general. But as usual, we'd like to encourage folks to email the show at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com if you want to share an opinion, you want to have a conversation with us. Keep the emails short and to the point, ideally, because that helps them include in the show more easily. But it's always great to hear from the community and get an involvement in the community discussion about what the hot button topics of Minecraft are right now. So Joel, why don't you kick us off with the email?
This email comes in from Vole Hunter, a bundle of inventory problems. I left this as a comment on YouTube, and someone suggested that I should send it in as a chunk mail message. Ender chests, shulker boxes, and bundles all allow you to hold more items in their own way. What would help is to improve the access to this extra inventory, and I think this can be done by changing the inventory UI. I think a UI like the creative inventory with tabs could help. One tab is the main inventory, and all other tabs are slots where you can assign a shulker, bundle, or ender chest if there is one in the main inventory. These tabs would allow access to the items in the container as if it was in your inventory without placing it down or using weird clicks or button presses. Each tab is like a pocket lined with a shulker or a bundle. Imagine assigning 5 empty shulker boxes to tabs, selecting one of those tabs, and you start mining sand. When the shulker gets full, select the second tab and keep mining. The sand will go directly into the shulker that you have selected the tab for. You could have a shulker tab for stone bits, for deep slate bits, one for wood bits. When you need one or the other, just select the tab in your shulker you need to use and the stuff will come straight from the shulker. When the main inventory is selected, everything works just as it does now. Vole Hunter died of inventory cramming. That's a squishy way to die.
Yes, and one that is affecting more and more people these days. Yeah. So I have a modded perspective on this, but I'll let you go first. But I think the backpack I've been using in Fantasy SMP works kind of similarly to this. So I already have my thoughts kind of pre-formed here. But what are your first impressions of this idea, Joel?
So I feel like the email sort of leaves bundles out of the conversation as it goes on. It quickly focuses on larger items and shulker boxes and things like that. And as per our discussion today and things that you've brought up on the show before, bundles are not meant to be just another shulker box, but smaller. Like they're meant to have a different functionality entirely. While I do think there are some UI changes needed, I think the functionality here, as described, is a little bit too much like creative inventory. And I don't think we will ever be able to interact with shulkers in that way without putting them down. Moving something from a shulker on one tab to your main inventory, or being able to access that shulker in a tab to your hotbar, just feels like now you've just got like 9 times. Well, like how many tabs can you have? Like what's the limit on the tabs that you have in your inventory? And that then leads into the problem of how much time do you want to spend in your inventory UI? The idea of changes to the UI should be to streamline the process, allow you to find things faster and get back to building. And I think that while we still have to interact with shulker boxes on the ground, and I will very often apologize to my stream viewers for me popping through like 6 shulker boxes in quick succession looking for something as I flash a UI up on the screen, I do think that less time in the UI would be better. It would be a more of an intuitive way of playing Minecraft. And as someone that plays No Man's Sky that has an expandable inventory, and if you're on your freighter, has access to all of your not shulkers, got Minecraft in the brain, of course, all of your storage bins via tabs, you spend way more time in that game in your inventory than you want to. It's a lot of complicated items. It's a lot of complicated storage. Obviously, you can store things however you want. You can have a bin for your organics, a bin for your minerals, all that kind of stuff. But what you really want to be doing in No Man's Sky is flying around space, exploring stuff and building things, not sitting in your inventory for 15 minutes trying to find something or organize things. And I don't want Minecraft to fall victim to that, because there's something very intuitive and I don't want to say basic, but straightforward about Minecraft to new players. And if you start adding tabs to inventory, I think it could get potentially convoluted quite quickly. Also, the tabs in creative work well because it's an index. You're searching for something to then add to your hotbar. It's not where you store things, because in creative, there is no real storage for the player. You don't need it because you just get access to infinite things. And I think that that's why the creative inventory with tabs helps for players looking through the entirety of Minecraft's block set. You need to have them organized in order to help. Or like, I do in creative, I just use the search bar. I just start typing the thing that I want, and that's how I get to it. And again, I don't think having a search thing in your inventory in Minecraft is going to be good either. What I do hear from the email, to kind of go with what I think the positive pull from this is that there seems to be a lot of frustration with the bundle UI and the way that players interact with bundles. And at this stage, I don't know whether it's like pushback because it's new and different and players aren't used to it, or if it's because it really doesn't feel good, it doesn't feel intuitive, it doesn't feel right when compared to other things that players perceive as containers in the game. And the bundle is this weird halfway point between, it's not really a container, right? Like it doesn't act like or have an inventory like every other container. Like if you open up a dropper, a hopper, a shulker box, a double chest or a chest, an ender chest, like it's very intuitive. You see slots, you know what to do with the slots. Things go in the slots. Bundles are different. And while I think it needs to be maybe a little bit more familiar, they need to do something with the UI to indicate this doesn't work like a shulker box. And right now, it does feel very different, like from a different game almost. So I don't know what the solution is. But I encourage people to continue to send Mojang constructive feedback, let them know what you think, and let them know how you think that they could be better. But this email did kind of strike me as like definitely something that's in the forefront of a lot of players' minds, but it felt kind of like I just want the creative inventory in survival pitch. It felt a little bit OP, I think, is the bottom line.
I think the thing about the bundle UI is that it looks more like the UI when you hover over any other block or item or tool, right? Like it's got that blank black space in it with the purple border instead of being like a light gray border with dark gray squares in it. And so it doesn't inherently feel like, hey, this is something I can put items into. So the visuals of the UI are a little bit different, but like you said, that feels like it should be an indication of it behaving differently as a container. And yeah, I agree. The bundle, I think, suffers from a problem of players wanting a solution which is just more space, because more space is the simplest solution. It means you can both throw a stack of items in somewhere and it takes up a spot, or you can just throw in the type of stuff that you'd put into a bundle, like the loose flowers and seeds and stuff that you feel like, I want to save this instead of throwing it away, but I don't have enough space for it. Let me just tuck it in a shulker box or something. And like that's what people imagine being an inventory solution when the bundle, I think, solves one of those two problems, but it solves it in a way that I think is better long-term for that particular problem than throwing all of your seeds and grass and stuff in a shulker box and still having that take up space when it doesn't need to. And yeah, I think in terms of the general gist of this email, the tab idea, it makes sense in the context they've given it, right? For gathering materials. If you were gathering sand and you just had the sand automatically fill in your shulker box instead of clogging up your inventory, if you designate that shulker box for, I'm going to gather sand as long as this box is active. When it fills up, the next one becomes active and I continue gathering sand or stone or whatever it is you're getting hold of. I feel like that makes sense, but then you get the problem of, well, how do I now interact with that? How do I empty that shulker box? Do I have to take it out of my inventory, put it down, attach it to a hopper, it drains all of the items? What then happens to the tab? There are a lot of problems to solve with how you then interact with that. When you put it back in your inventory, does it return to the same place, or does it become tab number 5 where it was tab number 2? You know,
right,
there are a few different things which they sound so simple on paper, but when you get to the practical implementation of them, you would find that gets frustrating. And making the inventory 5 times deeper, in this case, if you had multiple tabs of shulker boxes, would mean players spend more time in the UI searching for items. Like the example you gave with shulker boxes all being down on the ground, you're doing that, but in your inventory UI, that means the player stays immobile for longer. And I don't know about you, but I find that I try and spend as little time in my inventory as possible when I'm out there in the world, because if night falls while I've got that open and the background is blurred so I don't really notice the time and like the change of daylight, then a creeper sneaks up on me and suddenly I'm worried about my inventory being all over the ground in loose piles instead of all over my inventory. And so, yeah, I think there are a few pain points when it comes to players not wanting to spend as much time in their inventory as all that, which prevents them from really implementing things that the inventory time adds up with, like having tabbed inventory like this. So yeah, I've been playing with a backpack on Fantasy SMP. It has 5 rows worth of storage, so like a little under a double chest, but still a pretty decent expansion to the player inventory. And that has its own tab, just like this, basically. And so I've run into a few different issues with this, part of which are my own muscle memory. Like, half the time I do forget it's there. And that's my fault, partly. It's an experience thing. Like, I'm used to having a set amount of inventory space. I have even prevented myself from, or at least kind of steered myself away from, creating any kind of automated inventory in this, even though it's a mod pack with a ton of extra items. Like, I haven't delved into the storage mods that help you access stuff through, like, a single terminal interface. And that's really because I find those searchable inventory things, like you, a little bit awkward in Minecraft. They don't really feel Minecrafty enough to me, especially for this fantasy world idea. So I kind of, steered myself away from those. But when it comes to this backpack, I'm looking for like crucial crafting resources, or like the blocks that I was planning on, bridging around or pillaring up through this dangerous terrain with. And I think, oh, my inventory doesn't have anything in. I forget that I've got this backpack that has a few stacks of netherrack in that I've already gathered as I was bridging across this lava lake, right? And that becomes a frustration more than it becomes, oh yeah, I remember this thing is convenient. It becomes, oh, that thing again. How did I forget that was there? So I think it's just as likely to cause frustration for players as it is to cause, any kind of significant, like, improvement to their quality of life. And maybe that's an exaggeration just based on my own experience, but I feel like having that extra inventory space, I start to take it for granted after a while, and you always need more because the backpack is eventually going to become full, especially when you have as many items as you do in modded. And the problem is still, unstackable stuff takes up a lot of space that you don't necessarily want it to, and the full stacks of items, you need to find space for them as well. I find that, like, navigating between UIs when you have a backpack gets kind of frustrating. And the mod that we've got on there is a reasonable implementation. The recipes are all relatively cheap, and it sort of does what it says on the tin. But you can't get to the backpack UI when you have a chest open. So I can't move stuff directly from my backpack to my chest. I have to leave one UI, transfer the items through my main inventory, and then go back to the other UI. And that's the same kind of problems that you'd get if you implemented a backpack in vanilla, is where does all the inventory space go on the screen when you're looking at something else? If you have tabs from shulker boxes, you can't like get the stuff from that shulker box into a chest or something if you're then putting away all of the sand that you've mined for long-term storage. And you've got to navigate through that without trying to cause the player too much frustration in, I have to open this, then I have to open that. And you just get the same issue that you get with shulker boxes. And having tabbed UI even means that you have to hide other elements of the UI. So when you've got your shulker box tab open, you can't then grab some stuff from that, put it in the 2x2 crafting interface, and then turn the wood that you've got into planks so that you can, use those a bit more. You have to, again, use your regular inventory screen as a middleman, which is something that I think this solution is trying to solve. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. It's not as easy as all that. There are gonna be pitfalls along the way, and while it sounds easy on paper, I think in practice, once you actually get down to it, there are more problems created by this type of solution.
And your hotbar, unless it gets bigger, you're going to have to keep that completely clean if you wanted to pull items out of a shulker box or out of a backpack, as you mentioned, into your inventory, because you're not going to be able to see anything but the hotbar. But if you've got your hotbar full of things that you're building with right now, as well as the other tools, you don't necessarily want to change all that. Because I get frustrated when I'm building and I've accidentally put a block where my pickaxe is normally, or I mess around like that, and then I have to take a minute to like reorganize everything so I can go back to building efficiently just because of muscle memory. And I think that the UI issues are not just space related. Something that I've been thinking about as you've been talking is the fact that I use a couple of mods for shulker boxes on the Citadel. One is the tooltip, where you can just press shift and not interact with the shulker box, but see what's inside of it while it's in your inventory. You just get a glimpse of like, these are the things. You still have to put it down. You still have to work with it just like a vanilla shulker box. You just get a UI pop-up window that says, this is full of sand items, or this other yellow one is full of coral. You've made them both yellow, which is your problem, but now at least you can see what's inside. The other thing is that we have Shulker Plus, which allows you to add items to a shulker box, and that also displays in your inventory. You can change the way that a shulker displays. Instead of being a cube, it can be just a flat square. And you can also see the fact that you've put a dead bush or a redstone torch or a iron ingot or a rocket on the top of the box.
It's like having a label maker basically for your shulker box.
Yes,
it's like you can put like an item frame on top of it, but it stays there permanently, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And it's colorful. It's simple. It's the same sort of basic nod that instead of writing apothecary on a sign in West Hill, I put a potion bottle on an armor stand and kind of had it hover there. And It's way more fun to have just a symbol instead of a word. And I think that the Shulker Plus mod, while I don't like the way that the blocks display, I do like the way that the items display, because they sit flat to the top of the box. They don't kind of stick out at all. But I find it very useful because I'm at a level in Minecraft where I've got all of my wood is in different color boxes as best I can, but the first 3-4 different kinds of woods are all in brown boxes. And so I've taken the hanging sign from each wood type and put it on the top of each box. And now I absolutely grab the correct box when I need oak, spruce, or dark oak. Acacia is in an orange box, and that's fine, but copper is also in an orange box. So I have a copper ingot on one and an acacia sign on the other. So that I find really, really helpful. And yes, they're all out in the world, but when they are in my inventory, I can tell you specifically which ones are the ones that I want. The problem is that I've also decided that I don't like those blocks hovering on the top of them. So I've not done that for things like cobblestone, stone, andesite. So I am constantly grabbing the wrong box. I just have to look at the label. Like I have to look at what I've called it to put those in the world. So what my solution has been to just put those things in the world in the exact same order every time. Cobble, tuff, andesite, stone bricks, and then cut stone and stuff. And so at least left to right, I know cobble's on the left, so's tough, and then everything else is just down the line. But it would be nice if we had more tools like this Shulker Plus mod in vanilla Minecraft that allowed you to see something on the top of a shulker. Or I don't know if it would necessarily work for bundles. I guess your idea there would be dyeing the bundles, because I can't see people having the same number of bundles as they do shulker boxes. Like I feel like bundles are there's a limit to what usefulness they are. If you've got
it's impractical,
2 or 3 maybe, yeah,
because you're only storing up to 64 items in them. After a while, your inventory is going to need to store stacks of items, so the bundle becomes completely unnecessary at that stage. Unless you're like, sure, let me put a stack of stone in here and give it a decorative wrapper. Like you don't need to worry about that stuff. I think the only other thing to consider here is, much as we don't want to have this conversation because I know people want Java and Bedrock UI to be separate considerations, you need to consider how it's going to work for mobile players, console players, everything like that, right? Like I think at this stage, any kind of implementation that works for Java and not Bedrock is just probably not going to happen. Like the team does not want to create more parity issues that they have to fix later, and usually in this case have to fix by completely changing how the object works. So I don't really imagine there being a case where they implement something like tabbed inventory and make that accessible for Java edition players, but then don't somehow find a way to get that working on Bedrock or for console, mobile, Windows 10 version, whatever. Like I think it's something that has to work for everybody. And maybe as if it's like a tappable thing, I can see it working for mobile, but even then I think there are enough issues with an idea like this that, yeah, it'd be an unusual implementation, I think, given the team's current approach to handling inventory.
We got another email this week that I thought would be really good for a main discussion. We very often get questions about how do I continue with my long-term world? How can I stay focused and continue on? This is a little bit different. This came in from Evo334. Hi, Johnny and Joel. I've been working on my Minecraft world for 12 months, building my starter village around the spawn chunks. While I have the main farms and villager setups, my builds lack the coherence seen in your projects. I want to move away and create something new, but I'm procrastinating because it feels like starting over and I'm so used to my current setup. Could you share advice on overcoming this procrastination and successfully starting anew? Evo334 set out for new horizons, but crafted an excuse to stay in the spawn village. So this is the opposite problem. This is I don't like the way things are looking. I want to move on to something new, but I'm really enjoying the convenience of having everything that I've worked on the last year at my fingertips. And I think it's an interesting idea. And at first, I misunderstood and thought that they wanted to start the world over, but it sounds like they just want to move on to a new project farther afield in the same world and maintain all of that. And I'm wondering if there's a way to like move on within the area. Like if the aesthetic of where you've started is not something you like, but all of the farms and legwork is done, there's nothing to say that you can't give it a facelift. Just because you've called something complete doesn't mean you can't revisit it. I guess you just have to make a decision if you want this Minecraft world to have that kind of history of like, oh, that's how I used to build before I got better or before I decided to change the theme or whatever of this world, and you want to leave those there. Or if it's like, no, this is not precious to me. What is precious to me is the game time, the progress, and the resources available. So it's nothing to throw a different skin on a villager farm or a sugarcane farm, whatever. Like just put a different building around it or put a different color to it, whatever it is that you want to do, move that. And that could at least give you a current project that will improve the way you feel about the area, but have you not really moving too far afield from it. Like, what are your first impressions for Evo's dilemma?
Well, this sounds exactly like what I've just done. Basically, like my starter area, I looked at it and thought, this is cool, but I don't have a coherent aesthetic in mind for it. Like, I built a few houses that have a similar, like, wood frame, slightly more colorful roofs and walls kind of style, but then I built a factory out of, like, bricks and copper and a few other building materials. I don't really want to change too much about the surrounding landscape because I really like the mountain and I don't want to adjust that. I had some vague ideas for how I wanted to landscape the place, but I thought, why not just go somewhere different to start this? And then I can start from scratch with a more coherent theme, and I've already got a lot of the resources that I need to get started. And that's the approach that I'm coming at this from, is that when you establish a starter base, you're still at the stage of a world where you're like scraping together whatever resources you can. You're getting like the iron tools and then the diamond tools, and you probably set up like a flimsy starter house for a place to stay, maybe upgraded that. And then you're just building stuff because it's like utilitarian, maybe with a little bit of extra stylistic flair added to it. Like you said, you have the resource farms nearby, you have a villager breeder, you have like a few trading booths for different villager professions. Everything you need to start the foundation for anything else you do later. Well, this is the thing you're doing later. This is the whole reason that you set up this foundation in the first place, is so that you can take those resources elsewhere and start to affect more of the wider world. And I think choosing a project area means starting over from scratch, but you're starting over with whatever like long-term diamond tools that you've got that probably have mending by now. You know, you're starting with a leg up on the initial survival grind that you took to get here, so you didn't have to start from wooden tools whenever you found whatever project area you're working on. And if you need to do a little bit of terraforming, then your diamond shovel is going to last you ages so that you can smooth out the landscape a little bit or completely remodel stuff. And I think it's important to recognize that as like the next stage of your world rather than starting over, like, because your initial base is going to be something you can always come back to, both for resources and if you feel like, you know, you need a little bit of time away, you need some more inspiration to strike before you return to that project area and keep on building. That's sort of my perspective on it. Like, I'm doing that right now, moving out to an area that I think has a fairly similar landscape to where I started off. There's cherry groves, frozen mountains, a little bit of a valley, but as far as everything else that's around it, village nearby, pillager outpost nearby, a lot of more interesting looking terrain, a bit bigger of a project area, and just a blank slate that I can start with terraforming and landscaping the area, instead of starting with, well, I need to establish a little shack and some storage and a place to stay, potion brewing, nether portal, that kind of early game grind that everybody needs to do before they really get going.
And I think, too, a lot of farms that you set up in your initial area, you're thinking future-proofing. And even if you're not making something magically overpowered from one of the, you know, the higher redstone designers that you'll see on YouTube that has thousands of items per hour, it's still going to be more than likely overkill for your world once you no longer need that resource immediately.
Yeah. So
once you've got through the thing that you needed it for, and now you're on to other things, it just builds up in the background until you have like a double chest or two full of that stuff, and you're just like, all right, well, I'm good, but I don't need that again. And one of the things that you could look into if you're going into a new area, if traveling back and forth isn't the easiest, then look into like micro farms. Like you could just set up a single cell sugarcane farm very quickly with all of the, you know, current mid to end game resources you have now, and have that be something that you just have nearby in that new build area, if that's something that you need. If it's not, well, then maybe build a farm that is going to trickle in a little bit, so you don't necessarily have to go back to your main area quite as much as you thought you would. The other thing is that traveling to and from, like, you might not have to go very far afield. Like, you might find as you explore, you're only a couple hundred blocks away and you find a really cool coral reef or something that you want to build on. And traveling a couple hundred blocks via the nether is super easy. Like, that's you know, an eighth of that length. And so it's really not that hard to go back and forth, I find. And then those nether tunnels and transportation systems become another project that you can work on. So when you're not inspired to work on the new creative area and you're not inspired to do the farms, you can work on the technical stuff, the you know, the subway hub of what you need to do in the world to get around. If you want to go the extreme length of it, on the Citadel, we've got these different build zones, and we've used command blocks. Just because it's 9,000 blocks in two different directions to get from West Hill to the spawn area. And we did that on purpose because we wanted to have different zones where players would not see each other's builds if they were different themes. So skyscrapers and modern stuff is going to be far away from medieval things. It might not be that important if you're on a single player world, but if you really wanted to have that feeling of, I'm leaving this behind, but I want to be able to return to it, you could use a command block to set up, you know, player teleportation and just kind of like create some fun theme about it. You know, maybe it's a Star Trek teleporter, maybe it's a, you know, fantasy portal that you pretend to go through when you trigger the command block. That kind of stuff is always fun. But I think it's certainly doable with vanilla mechanics in the Nether and all that. One thing that I thought would be interesting is using the the farms that you have now, the resources that you have now, to decide what you might want to do next. So rather than going out and realizing, oh, I'm just going to be starting over, I'm just going to be without, look at what you have and think about like what you could use now as like, well, my next mid-tier progression project is going to be this because I've got access to this kind of stuff. And then maybe in that new area, you're building farms or resources or the capability to then get to end game or get to whatever, like if you don't have a shulker box farm in your current main area, maybe that's something that you decide to build in the new one. And then the new one becomes like the future hub. There's no reason why you have to have just one hub. We see it all the time because it seems to be the most convenient thing on YouTube for spawn towns and multiplayer servers to have a place where players are going to run into each other on purpose. It creates better interactions. It creates better stories for people that are creating stories on servers. But if it's just you, there's no reason why you can't have 3, 4 hubs. If you like building farms and building up those resources, then you could have a wood and stone area. You could have a redstone and related items area. You could have along this nether network that you might need, you could have all of your nether farms in there as well. So there's things that you could do that I think are outside of what is very often I don't want to say the norm, but like the default setting that I think a lot of players approach Minecraft with. You can go outside of that, like just figure out a way that works for you and see what branches you might want to travel down. And if the spaghetti doesn't stick to the wall, then you can just abandon the project and take up the resources, either leave it, tear it down, whatever, and then move on to the next thing you think might work.
I think this also comes from this idea of having to play Minecraft the same way and like needing certain things in order to survive. That a lot of players get stuck in this idea of you have to sustain your own existence in Minecraft. And like, do you have anything in West Hill that you consider like your house? Like, is there ever anywhere that felt like this is my home base in West Hill? Or did you just treat it as like an overall build project and you're like, well, it's going to be a town. It's more about the fiction of the environment rather than it being like a base for you?
Not specifically a house, like with like a bed and a storage and things like that. I have used the keep as a base. So the keep basement will be the last thing that I change from what it is now, which is a giant open room with bulk storage and shulker box bays, to a copper distillery, which will have like big stills and piping and some fun decor, and eventually all of the bulk storage will be moved to the crypt. That's why I built the crypt under the graveyard. It's eventually going to have like all the grass and stone and wood and stuff that I had been collecting, and just don't want to pile into shulker boxes and move to a different location. I kind of want a reason to come back to West Hill too if I ever need like a double chest full of cobblestone or stone. Like I wanted to know that I have it there.
Yeah.
So the keep basement specifically I would say is a home base, not necessarily a house, because like the bed's in the middle of the room. Like it's a functional Minecraft place I go to get stuff and move stuff around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's what I was getting at, really, was that I have a house in my starter area that was my original base of operations, but more often than not, I sleep in my storage room, or like wherever I've got a bed handy. Half the time I carry a bed around with me because I know I need to sleep regularly in areas that I haven't fully lit up, like this area that I'm currently landscaping. And it just feels unnecessary to like walk to a house and sleep every night because, like, for a start, you can sleep as soon as the sun goes down before mobs even start spawning. And secondly, you're losing a bit of daylight gameplay time by walking to a house and sleeping somewhere. Like, that's probably like a minute back and forth that you're losing out of a 10-minute daytime, like, period of a Minecraft day. So, like, personally, I don't ever, when I start a new build project, I don't start by, like, building myself a house, right? Like, a lot of the time I'm starting with, okay, what's something that's going to make this project look like there's one building that you can look at and you're like, okay, that's the theme immediately. When I started building on Empire Season 2, the first thing I built was like a ruined house where the walls and roof had collapsed and there was this archway with pillars that kind of said, okay, this is a more classical style thing. But the majority of the rooms were just like empty, or there was like junk all over the floor. And then the place I ended up really spending most of my time was, again, a storage system that was built inside of these catacombs. And that was more because it was a place where I had a ton of like bulk storage, but it wasn't necessarily a place for me to live, and it still fit the theme of the area super well. And so I think if you approach a a project area like that, if you don't start by saying, well, I need to build myself a cottage before I can work on this whole like sci-fi area, like it doesn't necessarily happen that way. Like if you can work it into the theme somehow, then great. But I think you got to avoid doing everything exactly the same way when you move off to your new project area. You have to avoid starting it like, well, I need to establish a little village for all of the villager trading to happen in before I can really get onto anything else. And I think start on the theme. Like, establish the theme you're working with first is probably the best piece of advice I can give. Like, maybe do a little light research, at least decide on a build style of some kind, and then get one build down that really represents what you want to do with the rest of the area. And then otherwise you're just going to repeat the same mix of like functional and personal preference that characterizes your starter area. Like if I went to my new build area and built the same starter house that I built in the original area, I would probably just end up building in exactly the same style and end up being where I was and have a carbon copy of my original base, which isn't something you want. And then as you're going back and forth to the storage that you've already established in your starter base, just bring as much portable storage as you can. You know, get shulker boxes, bring an ender chest, anything you need to transfer items easily back and forth, and then it's going to feel like you have access to a lot of the resources that you were stockpiling at your main area, and so you're going to need to set up fewer farms and bulk storage for that stuff at your new project area until you're understanding what you're doing there. But I think start with getting something thematic down that you can look at and go, oh, I know how I want the rest of the area to progress from here.
I think having the theme first is also going to be helpful while you're looking for an area too. If you know that you want to build sci-fi, or if you know you want to build fantasy, if you know you want to build steampunk, whatever it is, those are just 3 examples, then you can then go and look for an area where you feel inspired to do that there. You may also find an area that inspires you to do something different. Maybe you've got steampunk on the brain, but you find a really pretty valley that just speaks to having like an Asia Pacific design. Like, you know, if there's a cherry grove nearby, that kind of stuff. I think that using the landscape, I think, will help you also make those logistical decisions. Is like, did the thing that I discover be it, you know, a mountain or a cherry grove or whatever, is it close or is it really far way away? How much do I have to prepare? Am I going to be happy with traveling back and forth a couple of times? Or is like, no, I want this one and done. Like I'm going to pack up like I'm going on a 6-month trip around the globe and not come back for a while. And in that way, like you can do the same sort of thing that we were talking about earlier, which is to bring your bulk blocks and only craft the things that you need as you need them. You know, instead of bringing shulker boxes, bring shulker shells and chests, things that you can stack, you know, in different containers and be able to expand once you land, you know, where you want to be, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I will honestly say that establishing that blue ice road out to the build area that I'm working on, like it gave me the monorail idea. And monorail informs so much of like what I'm working on now, is like this sort of retro futuristic idea, is like, what does the city of the future look like to people who only know what steam power and clockwork is? And I think that's sort of like a really neat way of approaching things. So even your transport connections can be an interesting way of getting some theme into an area. That is where we're going to wrap up the show for today, though, folks, but plenty of food for thought there. Hopefully that's inspired some of your future building projects. This is going to be where we wrap up the show for today, but you can find more information about the show and links to some of the stuff that we've talked about today at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show is composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, why not consider putting some value back in? You can do that at patreon.com/thespawnchunks, where pledging at any level will get you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat. You can listen to the show live when we record it in Discord every week. We have our monthly hangouts where patrons can let us know what they've been up to in Minecraft that month, and our quarterly hangouts where we get to share the behind-the-scenes stuff about the show. We currently have 305 patrons, which is down 10 from last week, but that's possibly also Patreon reshuffling a few things. We would love to welcome some more people in throughout the month of September. So special thanks, as always, go out to our content engineer patrons. That's Gundar H. Striker, Hunter555, Jumbo Sale, Mindtrip Media, Party Voyager, and Yitz. Thank you all for your support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest ways to support the show. It's free. You can just let people know about the Spawn Chunks and where they can go to listen to it. We are the Spawn Chunks on all the social media that matters. New episodes are available on Mondays on all of your favorite podcasting platforms. And of course, the video version is available on YouTube. You can email the show at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. The RSS feed is linked on the spawnchunks.com. That goes to Acast. And the patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page. That's where you can listen to the render distance, the extended version of the podcast.
My name is Johnny, but online I go by Pixel Riffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/pixelriffs, where the Minecraft Survival Guide is currently in its 3rd season. I also stream 3 days a week on Twitch, where right now I'm playing on the Fantasy SMP, but we also do behind-the-scenes work on Minecraft Survival Guide from time to time. I'm also the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which you can find through a quick YouTube search, and aside from that, I'm at Pixel Riffs on both Twitter and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
Everything that I'm doing online can be found at joelduggan.com. That includes a link to the Citadel Cafe, my other podcast about sci-fi and fantasy entertainment. Johnny is going to be joining me this week to talk about Rings of Power, the first 3 episodes of Season 2, which I watched over the weekend. I'm Joel Duggan on social media, very easy to find, and Joel Duggan on Twitch, where I'm currently scheduled to stream Wednesday through Saturday, but Satisfactory is launching on September 10th, so I've been adding in some extra streams, so look for maybe Tuesday, maybe other days, we'll see, but we are definitely going to be diving into that game when it reaches its 1.0 release, so check that all out at twitch.tv/JoelDuggan.
Thanks for visiting the Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, so you could settle down anywhere.